Here's an experiment for you. Take passionate experts in human resource technology. Invite cross-industry experts from inside and outside HR. Mix in what's happening in people analytics today. Give them the technology to connect. Hit record. Pour their discussions into a beaker. Mix thoroughly, and voila! You get the HR Data Labs podcast, where we explore the impact of data and analytics to your business. We may get passionate and even irreverent, but count on each episode challenging and enhancing your understanding of the way people data can be used to solve real-world problems. Now, here's your host, David Turetsky.
Hello, and welcome to the HR Data Labs podcast. I'm your host, David Turetsky. Like always, we try and find you fascinating people inside and outside the world of human resources to give you the latest on what's happening with HR technology, HR data, and HR analytics. Today, we have with us Caitlin MacGregor, who's the CEO and co-founder of Plum. Hey, Caitlin, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
And like always, we have with us our co-host, Dwight Brown. Hey, Dwight.
Hey, David. How you doing?
Great. Caitlin, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and where are you coming from to talk to us about the world of Plum?
So I'm the CEO and co-founder of software as a service platform that enables everyone to realize their full potential at work. We've started our company to take best practices from industrial organizational psychology and figure out how to scale that so that you have a positive employee candidate experience and get access to objective, fair data that allows you to really realize people's potential that may have been hidden before.
That's outstanding. So one fun thing, if you know Caitlin, you may not know that Caitlin was a windsurfing instructor. Caitlin, how did you become a windsurfing instructor?
So when I was early teen, my cousins from the U.S. would come through every summer on their way to a family cottage, and they would stop in small town southern Ontario and pick me up for a week and take me to their summer cottage. And they taught me how to windsurf. And after spending several years learning to windsurf, I got to kind of give back to the community and become a windsurf instructor. And my claim to fame was anybody from 7 years old to 70, I could get up and windsurfing within an hour.
Yeah, you haven't met me, so there you go.
I can imagine that.
Yeah, that would not be, first of all, it's not a pretty picture. And second of all, they'd say, is that a Sasquatch trying to learn how to windsurf? Yeah, it would not be fun. Sorry for the mental image, everyone.
Either that or who's that guy flailing in the water all the time?
Well, that would definitely be the result. No offense to Caitlin. She might be the greatest instructor in the world. It ain't going to work with me. Sorry. So today's topic is talking about how to revolutionize the global enterprise hire process and the ability to use psychometric data to help predict outcomes in the future. Let's go into question number one. So Caitlin, what is so revolutionary about using psychometric data for talent management?
Hi there, I'm Peter Zollman. I'm a co-host of the Inside Job Boards and Recruitment Marketplaces podcast.
And I'm Stephen Rothberg, and I guess that makes me the other co-host.
Every other week, we're joined by guests from the world's leading job sites.
Together, we analyze news about general, niche, and aggregator job board and recruitment marketplaces sites.
Make sure you sign up and subscribe today.
So I think there's a couple of points that really is to be revolutionary. One is that psychometric assessments have been used for 30 years, but often by consultants that are using outdated personality models, outdated technology. I like to compare it to kind of the flip phone version. You know, this is 2021. We've come a long way with being able to improve the quality of the science, have a gold standard around best practices for testing, problem-solving ability, social intelligence, personality that you can't game, but also creating a really, fantastic employee and candidate experience where they get value from the process, not a black box. They're giving 25 minutes of their time, and in return, they're learning a lot more about them. This data can become valuable for them as well. And so I think really recognizing that science has come a long way, but the user experience has as well, and the scalability of it. You don't have to use it in a single use case, one and done. that this data can be a foundational piece for every talent decision. So being able to take that data, throughout the entire life cycle of an employee and through every level of the organization is really something we haven't seen in the industry up until now.
So, Caitlin, then I guess the data has to mature as well as the person matures, and they have to constantly be asked either the same questions or new questions in order to be able to test how they've matured and how they've grown in that position, correct?
Actually, it's not. So what changes constantly are the behavioral requirements of a role. So we're hearing all the time from enterprise companies that as quickly as every 6 months, roles are changing. That's what we need to keep up to date. That's what we need to understand. It's constantly evolving. But a person after the age of 23-ish, their priorities, the things that really allow them to thrive and continue to provide exceptional results and things that come easily to them and give them a sense of self-worth, those are pretty stable throughout their career. And the things that drain them and really lead to long-term burnout, those things are also pretty stable. What changes are the coping strategies that somebody had. What changes is the hard skills that they've been able to accumulate over time. But really what drives them and what drains them and allows them to be exceptional, those things are quite consistent. And so it's about understanding how they can apply those transferable innate talents to roles as they change and grow. And their readiness may change over time, but we're looking at that potential. If they were just given the opportunity, how likely are they to adapt and excel in this new opportunity?
So you're saying that the assessment once taken at the beginning then doesn't necessarily change, but that the role definitions and the way in which we're measuring what the person is working on at the moment changes and needs to be kept up to date.
Correct.
And what's the drumbeat? What's the cadence where that data gets refreshed?
And so it's like any job that you're looking at it 6 months later, and now the role has a new purpose. The role has new requirements. That's a good time to be updating it. I like to think about it also in terms of KPIs, key performance indicators. Mm-hmm. We've all bought into the fact that best practices are to define success based on what goals you want somebody to accomplish in the role. Well, if you think that those KPIs for that role have changed 12 months later, or 6 months later, or 18 months later, then probably the behavioral requirements to change will have changed as well. And what we're really focusing on is quantifying those KPIs, the key behavioral indicators that define success for a role. And as soon as you want to be fresh, why not take an 8-minute assessment instead to quantify those behaviors than to rely on a subjective job description?
Typically, who are the people you're asking about those behaviors? Are you asking managers to do it? Are you asking HR to do it? Is it someone who's an IO? Who are the people who have to then judge what those behaviors are for success?
Yeah, so best practices in the field of biopsychology. This is a standard job analysis where you would have industrial organizational psychologists come in and interview 3 to 8 job experts. And the question is, well, who's a job expert?
Right.
Well, a manager is often the same person that would set the KPIs. So they have the same knowledge to be able to prioritize the KPIs, the key behavioral indicators.
Sure.
But the manager is only one data point. So who else 360 view on that role? Well, maybe a couple of top performers, not to clone them, but to say, hey, what if you were to hire your best friend, what would you tell them to do to please the boss? Mm-hmm. And then maybe that HR business partner or maybe that manager. You want to kind of get this view of who would sit on an interview panel for that new person coming in to say if they could potentially meet the requirements. If you get 3 to 8 people with these different perspectives on the role and they're all aligned, they all say, hey, yes, we need somebody who's really good at execution and innovation and teamwork. And you have that alignment. When you get somebody into the role that's a 94 match or a 98 match, then you have a great deal of confidence that they have the behavioral requirements that you're looking for.
So let me ask a different question, Caitlin. Is it important to look at resumes or to look at other past experience when you're hiring or promoting people?
I like to think of it like reference checks. We always want to do reference checks. We want more data, sure. Of course. It's just a question of where you do it in the process. And I think this is the dirty little secret in our industry. is that we've got decades of proof showing that where you went to school, where you previously worked, that historical view of where somebody has already been, that there's two problems with it. One, it's embedded with the systemic barriers and biases that dictate access to education, internships, how fast you progress in your career. But also, statistically, it doesn't correlate with future success. You can line up 100 people from the same school with the same experience, and you cannot predict which of those 100 will be successful in a role versus the others. You have to look at people's innate talents, their ability to innovate, communicate, work well with others. That's what defines long-term success. Future of work, we've all read the studies before the pandemic. Everything was about the future of work and transferable soft skills. So we've been talking about it, but the point is that you can actually measure it. And by measuring those transferable soft skills, they are 4 times more accurate at predicting long-term success. So wouldn't you want to start your process with the most predictive data and then bring in the resumes after you're already focusing on those people with the greatest potential? Use the resumes to talk about readiness, talk about can they hit the ground running? Do they have the experience that you want, the salary requirements you want? Use that data later to help you continue to narrow down the people. But once you're looking at and speaking with the people that have the greatest potential for long-term success.
Yeah, Caitlin, I think the problem is right now that equation's flipped, though. You have to get the resume past those people who are the gatekeepers, because you'll never get to assess someone because the gatekeeper, whether it's the AI, who's the new talent expert who tries to find the right keywords, and when they don't see enough of a keyword density, they toss you in the reject pile and you go on to the next one. So how do they flip the equation and start finding people before they actually even see the resume?
Well, it takes bold leaders, often from purpose-driven organizations that have realized that gone are the days of understanding employees merely as a collection of hard skills and past experiences. So we know that employees are so much more than that, and we know that employees want to be seen for their full potential. So this is an opportunity for companies to differentiate and say, we want to understand you holistically. And as part of that, we're going to give you data on yourself as to what allows you to thrive and where you flourish more. But you can't do that passively. You can't scrape resumes and get that insight. You can't look at social media profiles. This is where, this entire field of science and industrial organization psychology, you have to assess it. You need a psychometric assessment. And yes, it's 25 minutes, but it takes less time than building a whole LinkedIn profile. And that one data set can be used for all these different use cases. We've just been talking about at the beginning, if you're applying for a job, how do you stand out with 1,000 other people?
Right.
Well, this gives you a chance to truly stand out, but you can use that data to then onboard the person. You can use that data to help with professional development, with manager one-on-one conversations, with internal mobility, to identify your future leaders. So it's a small price to pay, small time commitment, and then that person is now fully seen and has that data to really drive their own career as well.
But it does take that change to go from the resume-based hiring process to what? What's the alternative? How do you find people in that case? Do people have to have these assessments banked as they're, if you think about 23andMe, like our DNA, our skills-based DNA, and that if a company needs somebody who has my particular, I don't want to even use the word genetics, but if they need my genetics, that they go to this database, they look for those particular skills on those particular nodes in the job DNA, and that's the people that they select.
I think long-term, this is the other side of the coin for LinkedIn. LinkedIn has given us that hard skills and that historical view. I think to be able to complement that with this additional missing data set, long-term, yes. Right, what's happening right now is companies, it's part of the application. It's part of the employee experience. If you want to apply, you don't have to apply to a single job at a company anymore. You can just apply to that company. And the company can use this data to then say, hey, actually, I don't know if you've been thinking about this. I know your background's in underwriting, but you make a fantastic product manager. Are you interested in having that conversation? And so it really changes how you're applying. You're applying with a single assessment, or you're an employee, and when you go through your next, professional development conversation, hey, take this 25-minute assessment, and now we can have a really rich, personalized conversation, and we can identify opportunities that you may not even know exist in the organization. We can get away from the Marco Polo effect of only getting referred by bosses that have worked with you, and now it's show your talents to anybody inside your organization that's looking for what makes you unique.
So for those listeners that may be wondering, how does this differ from some of the assessments you go to in Indeed.com or ZipRecruiter, and they advertise that they have a lot of assessments that can be used? How does this differ, and is there a way to mesh that into those current processes?
Yeah, it's a really great question. So first and foremost, it's the quality of the science. So you can't get these accurate, valid, objective results in 90 seconds or 15 minutes. You really need the 20 to 25 minute minimum to get enough data to find that consistency and to get the individual parts. It's not just personality. You also need that problem solving, that social intelligence. You know, there's no language in math, but we're still figuring out how do you solve abstract problems, how do you solve people problems, and how do you prioritize your behavior in a way that you can't fake or game. And so we work with a lot of mid-market and enterprise companies specifically that the science and the validity is the number one priority, especially for legal reasons. When you're using this for selection, even internal mobility selection, you have to make sure that it is job relevant.
Absolutely.
And so that process we talked about earlier in 8 minutes, that's giving you your job relevance. But if you have this off-the-shelf catalog, not only have they been proven not to be accurate, but they're often not job relevant to that exact company. So the first thing that differentiates us is the quality of the science. The second thing is that because it can match to any role, even as those roles update, you get to use it in much greater scenarios. Most companies do an internal benchmark that require 50 to 100 people who have all done the same job. So it doesn't scale beyond that bottom 20% of the organization where you have enough volume. Or they use Korn Ferry to come in and do a job analysis, which is very expensive and can only work on the top 10% of organizations because of how it's deployed. So the middle 70% of organizations don't actually have data on the behavioral needs of their roles. And so a lot of these internal mobility use cases, or looking at even, creating an earlier pipeline for succession planning, or looking at emerging leadership potential on early talent to fill a more diverse pipeline, that data isn't really touching the middle 70% of employees. So yes, it might help maybe with one role that you're hiring for, but you're not going to get that data being repurposed for all these different use cases, and you're not going to have the quality and validity of the data that we're providing. So those are the biggest things that are really standing out for us.
What jobs do you typically see that are the best candidates for this, or do you think it's all types of jobs?
For now, I think professional services, mostly because of the length of the assessment. I still find that hospitality and retail, they want the very quick. Validity isn't the top of the list of needs for them. So we find that professional roles, white collar roles tend to be what our customers use this for primarily, but at all levels of the organization, it's this idea that it creates a common language, that if you and your manager say, hey, I can see that teamwork is something that really drains you, I'm gonna make the effort to make sure that we're being mindful about the teamwork time that we're spending. As I'm going to fill in some of that heavy lifting so that, and I'll work with you to create coping strategies. If they're using the same common language, it really creates this new way of really supporting people. So we're seeing across all levels. We're seeing it mostly in professional roles, and we're seeing it in industries that are going through transformation. And that's a really broad set of categories of who's going through transformation and who's purpose-driven, where they're really focusing on that employee experience and giving back to their employees. Banks and insurance companies and kind of industries going through transformation.
One of the problems that we typically see, especially on this podcast, but across the consulting activities that we do, is data is typically a problem for clients. And it seems like this is going to be one of those things where data cleanup is a very critical issue prior to even collecting this data, because you have to connect this data to data that you have about the employee in order to be able to make this useful, right? So what becomes the priority, the collection of the data or the connection of the data to the data that they have on the back end?
I think this is a really big question that people are trying to understand right now. For us, first and foremost, we believe that this data is completely missing from the decision-making process. And so our first priority, it really does sometimes feel like you get to put on, like you're a superhero and you get to put on special X-ray glasses and now you see the world entirely different and you can see people you never saw before. We just want to get those glasses onto everybody as quickly as possible so they can see what they've been missing out on and that we can really enable people to realize their whole potential. And we think that this can change businesses and change people's lives and have a real impact. So for us, our main priority is just getting this data out there. And then once you start using it, then it becomes, okay, well, how do I want to marry this with other data? And then you start to realize where you were prioritizing other data maybe needs to change. And honestly, the systems that exist out there weren't built to bring in the rich visualization and the intuitiveness that we've created in our platform. So a lot of our clients want to get this started right away, and they can. They can hit the ground running, using it right away, getting all of that. And then we handle the integrations and the data merging as a secondary issue, but it's never gotten in the way. We always get to that after the value is fully realized. In some cases, it's done up front for sure. And we always find ways through that with enterprise companies, just the volume of data that they're using. Sometimes that's a prerequisite. But I think the real issue is getting this data used first and foremost. And then we can figure out the workflow and the integrations and the marrying of the data.
Yeah, our experience has been that you can't even identify the people to take the assessments because sometimes the descriptions are really bad or the job titles don't tell you what the people really do. So you kind of don't even know what they really are, who they are, until you fix that data first. And then you can go on to collecting data on them. But I understand what your point is. They're basically two independent pieces because the richness of the data that you're bringing isn't in the job description today. And it's not in any of the assessments that they may have taken already. It's something net new.
Exactly. You've nailed it.
Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by Turetsky Consulting and listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
So let's move on to the third question, if I might, which is, how can you actually use psychometric data to help identify people and grow them to develop into future leaders? How do you do that? What's the process steps?
Yeah, this is the piece of the puzzle that I think is really exciting for me because I haven't seen the industry do it this way. Typically, you see, big companies in the consulting space focusing on leadership potential where they'll come in with sometimes 3 different assessments or 3 different logins, and they'll focus on directors and above that have already been identified for some sort of succession plan. And they have them take an assessment to then say, hey, do you have the foundational building blocks to be successful as a leader? Do you have that leadership potential? And I think that the biggest opportunity is really saying, where do you have the greatest diversity in an organization? It's often, all the numbers show there's greater diversity earlier in the talent life cycle, that in those more junior roles, you tend to have greater diversity. And as you move up the ranks, you start to lose that diversity. So there's a real opportunity to identify that leadership potential much earlier in the organization. So instead of saying, well, this is my pool of employees that have been nominated by their managers that they think have future leadership potential, let's give it to every single employee through the company. Let them take a 25-minute assessment, immediately get their own professional development guide that talks about what drives them and trains them, gives them a roadmap for their own development. And on the back end, let's look to see which ones of them have those foundational dimensions that predict long-term leadership potential. And not just leadership at your organization, but across the board that have been proven, again, from industrial organizational psychology to be these foundational dimensions. And let's give everybody that opportunity. And then the company can focus on the top 10% or top 25% to actually invest in giving them the on-the-job experience to develop that leadership, but also the learning and development to do it so that you can start to build that bench strength of future leaders right from the beginning with the most diverse talent. We're spending a lot of energy trying to bring in diverse talent, which is fantastic. But the next step is, how do you take the talent you have within your organization and nurture it and bring those diverse early talent into the process? And so our leadership potential is really about identifying at all levels those foundational dimensions.
But Caitlin, let me push back on you a little. One of the clear things you said before was that you should be also looking at people outside your organization who may actually be interested in looking at opportunities in your organization. So wouldn't you want to develop not just the future leaders who are internal, but also looking at the potential for people who've identified themselves as being potential applicants or potential hires, and ask them to take an assessment and then them be also considered for the spots that become available? And I'm not just talking about for succession planning purposes, because obviously they would be, but for roles that may open up that may require their specific set of skills.
Absolutely. The idea is that once you have this data, you can just keep looking at it from different angles. Every talent decision you would ever want to make, you now have this data to help enrich it. So you're not just necessarily hiring that person into the organization for the role they have today. You now have that data to say, hey, what other roles right away would I see that they could potentially move into? This is where you see roles that have massive labor shortage. We know there aren't enough people in the world that have backgrounds in cybersecurity. This is also an opportunity to say, hey, I see that somebody could be amazing in this field. I'm going to hire them in and I'm going to upskill them within the walls of the organization. I'm going to fill the labor shortage that way. Or I'm going to bring them in for this role. And now I see that they also, if I worked on them, I could not only move them into being a software developer, but that's my future Scrum Master. And that's going to be my future team lead, because they also, in addition to developing their coding skills, we're going to develop simultaneously their management skills, because they have that pre-baked foundation that will just make it a fantastic ROI for the company and the individual. This still comes back to what drives people? Mm-hmm. What comes naturally? Where did they excel? It's not that other people couldn't be trained to be leaders, but you're looking for who's going to feel great at the end of the day because they spent the majority of their time leading others, versus there are people that will feel great at the end of the day because they solved really complex problems as part of a team or individually, but leading was not the thing that was going to fill their bucket. So you have this data and you can apply it to every single human being that now has put their hand up to say, I want to be part of your company, or is already investing their time being an employee.
So there are really two key aspects that are being addressed here. Number one, candidates come in and day one, they sort of have a career path mapped out, but it's a very personalized career path to their talent, skills, and ability. And then the other dimension of this is also the organizational career path, if you will. Everybody is part of this overall vision, and it helps the organization to be able to move the chess pieces accordingly, as opposed to always kind of working on instinct and guesswork in terms of how to fill these positions, who might be next in these positions. Is that accurate?
Yes, it's 100% accurate. And I would also say that once you have this data on your applicant pool, you can start to say, we're getting a lot of applicants like this, but we're not getting actually a lot of people that are innovative. Are we attracting the people that we need for the type of roles that are going to be coming up? Or looking in the organization and saying, we've got some really innovative projects coming up. Who are the most innovative people that I should be tapping or looking into? And do we need more of those? It's really an understanding of how to make sure you have a balanced workforce as well, or that you can lean in on certain areas that you want to develop in your organization. So you can also get that, holistic view of where there are trends in your own organization and potential gaps that you want to start working on, so that 3 years from now, you have a better mix of what you're looking for.
So, Caitlin, not trying to presuppose here, but can someone who's listening to this say, take the Plum assessment and see something, see some magic in there, and then be able to utilize that for themselves?
Absolutely. So this is one of the things that we think is really important, is giving people the opportunity to have that self-awareness. So people can go right now onto the internet and type in use.plum.io/PG, which is for Talent Guide. And it'll allow you to create your own Plum profile for free. And normally you only get your top 3 talents, but with this use.plum.io/PG, you'll get your full talent guide, all 10 of your talents, really see what drive and drain you. And you can use that and you can promote it on your LinkedIn, your top talent. You can share it with your manager or your spouse and have a conversation about it and compare notes.
Well, Dwight and I are definitely going to take it afterwards, and then we'll compare notes and let you know. So thank you very much, Caitlin. I think we learned a tremendous amount about your platform. We learned about what is so revolutionary about psychometric data in the world of talent management. We talked about its importance and being able to look at people from the assessment, not looking at it from the context of the resume into what are they bringing to the table, and potentially even before we actually see the resume, looking at who they are and what they are through the assessment. And the last thing we talked about is how can you actually use psychometric data in place of the gut feel to grow future leaders. Is there anything else that you wanted to add before we close?
I just think that we need to really recognize that this is about adding objective, fair data into the process and being able to see people holistically. And the time is now. I know it's a bold move. I know it's different, but we've got the science. We've got the technology to be able to do it. What are we waiting for? If the last 18 months hasn't taught us anything, so this is the time to really embrace people as who they fully, truly are, not just a collection of hard skills and past experience.
Sure. Cool. Dwight, anything else?
Oh, this has been fascinating. It really has challenged me to look at the traditional way of doing things, because I've been at this for many years, and that's what my mindset is. So the idea of being able to identify my talent, skills, and abilities, my KPIs, and as you talked about, a little bit mind-bending.
We're definitely going to want to. We definitely want to rip up our resumes now, right?
Right.
And just take the Plum. Yeah, I'm going to take the Plum assessment instead. Well, again, thank you very much, Dwight.
Thanks, David.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you for listening. And if you like this episode, please hit the subscribe button. And if you know somebody who might find use of this episode, please do forward it to them. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave it to us on your favorite social media platform or go to turetskyconsulting.com/podcast and let us know your thoughts. Thank you very much. Take care and stay safe.
That was HR Data Labs. Please visit turetskyconsulting.com/podcast to review the show, add comments about this episode, or add new ideas about upcoming shows you'd like to hear. Feel free to be creative, but please be nice. Thank you for joining us this week on the HR Data Labs podcast, and stay tuned for our next episode. Stay safe.